off my phone. Okay. Staff? Ready? Almost. Terrific. Then with a quorum of commissioners, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Freed, could you take roll, or whoever is going to take roll?
Commissioner Chomsky.
Present.
Commissioner Peng.
Present.
Chair McCroskey.
Present. I would like to read the following land acknowledgement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lisjan. We acknowledge that the genocide that took place on these lands, and we must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and to together build a better future for all that now make this their home. Thank you. That brings us to the public comment item on our agenda. This is an item, a chance for comments on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. I don't see any staff or commissioners in the room. Do we have any folks at home who wish to, again, use the raise your hand feature to ask to make a comment if you're at home on Zoom? And I'll turn it over to staff.
Yes, our first speaker is Jeremiah Penguelo. Jeremiah, please go ahead.
Yay. Again, I love how you pronounce my last name. It's great. So I just want to say a couple things. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, the VO scooters, I did receive a helmet in the mail for free. I just want to let everybody know that whoever signed up for VO, all you got to do is call them and they mail you a helmet. It's a really nice helmet. I mean, it's very, very nice. I might even just wear it around as a fashion statement. It's just pretty cool looking. But it looks safe, and it would just be nice if maybe the city put out a memo or something to the public to remind the public, to encourage the VO scooters. Say, hey, if you sign up for VO, just remember to get your free helmet, kind of thing, because I don't know how many people know you can get a free helmet, but I do, and I got one. So just trying to spread the good word. Also, last month, maybe the month before, I witnessed a couple car accidents on San Pablo. I was actually the first one on the scene. I called Albany Police twice. Stood there with my hazards on. Bill Police arrived. I even had a traffic cone in the back of my Jeep. I put out. Some other guy stopped and lit a flare. And each of those accidents was at least three cars involved. And it had something to do with a pedestrian crossing the street. One car stopped, the other car didn't know someone was crossing, and they slammed in the back of the car ahead of them. So I just wanted to remind everybody, to make crosswalks more safe on San Pablo. I know we put up those pedestrian signs. Thank you, everybody. But maybe some push-button LED lights I know at nighttime it's very difficult to see people crossing the streets. You got 2 bars, you got a bunch of drunk people crossing the streets at night, so it'd be kind of nice to help. There's a street light that has a strobe effect on Solano and Ordway. Nighttime, it flickers. I've called Public Works a couple times. I reported to the police department. It's like a strobe light at night. And with talking about the streetlights on Solano, the eastern part of Solano, they're really dark. I mean, they're yellow light, and they don't provide a lot of luminosity. So I was wondering if the city plans on updating those streetlights to LED lights. I can imagine those are really expensive to change if a bulb goes out. So yeah, update the streetlights on Upper Solano to LED. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Carrie Schulman. Please go ahead.
Hello. Thank you for everything you do to improve transportation in Albany. I was so excited at the last meeting to hear about a possible plan for adding a way for bikes to cross San Pablo at Washington Avenue. So I wanted to remind you guys about how important that is, and hopefully that can be near the top of your agenda items. I live near the Albany Middle School, and my kids go to Ocean View, and we take, right now the best alternative for getting across San Pablo to get to school is at Solano. But Solano is really too narrow for cars to drive past bikes. So they just kind of have to uncomfortably drive behind the bikes and then angrily pass when there's an opportunity, which is really uncomfortable for biking. The other day, we were biking to school, and it was actually really cool. We ran into some other people biking to school, and the next thing we knew, there was like about 15 of us all biking to Ocean View together, which was really cool. And then when we got to Solano Avenue to cross San Pablo, I was surprised to see that about half of the cyclists we were with started biking on the sidewalk at Solano, which I know is technically illegal to bike on the sidewalk, but it's such a difficult crossing there that I really didn't blame them for making that choice to ride on the sidewalk rather than deal with the stressful part of biking across San Pablo on Solano. So if instead there was that crossing that you guys have planned to do at Washington Avenue, it would just be such a better situation for so many people. I know there's a crossing at Dartmouth Avenue, that's great, but it's, the distance between Dartmouth to the north end of Albany is a mile. So that's a whole mile of San Pablo where there's not any good option to cross San Pablo. So it makes it, it would just be such a huge improvement if you guys could add that crossing at Washington. So I really hope that can be at the top of your list for the next improvements, to add that Washington crossing at San Pablo. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
We have no other hands raised at this time.
Okay. With that, I'll bring it back to the commission. No public comments from the commissioners. Okay, let's keep it moving along. Next, we move to the item number 3, and it's the monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Just 1 minute. Thanks, Michelle. The reporting period for this presentation is both November and December data. In November, there were 2 pedestrian-involved collisions and 1 in December. Next slide. And there were 0 bike-involved collisions in November and 1 in December. In November, there were 9 vehicle collisions, 4 of which were injury collisions, and in December, there were 15 collisions, 5 of which were injury collisions. 16 and 31 moving citations were issued respectively, and 2 DUI arrests in November and 3 in December. And that concludes the police data report.
Any questions from commissioners? With that, we'll open it up to public comment.
We have 2 hands raised. The first is Brian Martin. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Brian Martin, resident. I had a question about citations, about parking citations. I'd like to hear if the city issues, if it's basically illegal to block your own driveway, and what the statute is for that. Is it illegal or against the law or ordinance or state law or city law? What's the situation for a vehicle to block its driveway or to block? And so what I'm wondering is if it's against an ordinance or state law for a vehicle to block a driveway, so first of all, if it's against the law, if it's a ticketable offense, is that something that the city, the police have selectively chosen to deprioritize, which is fine. I think that's great because that allows homeowners to block their own driveway or renters to block their own driveway without citation and free up parking for other people. Or is there a statute that says homeowner is exempt and it's only people who are not a homeowner or renter that are allowed to get a ticket? And does the city functionally just only ticket based on complaints, and that's how the city prioritizes? This is an important question. I hope I can get a full answer on, because I think it will be important in the discussion about parking and citations on Adams and Keynes. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We'll wait till we come back to the commissioners to answer any questions.
Next up is Jeremiah Pinguelo. Please go ahead.
Yeah. I was wondering that myself about parking in front of the driveway.
Jeremiah, we're having trouble hearing you.
Okay, let me see. Is that better? Are you able to hear me now?
Not much.
Not much. Okay, I got full service. I was just going to say that, I don't see a problem with cars, blocking their driveway if they're parking on the street. But I mean, if they were in their driveway blocking the sidewalk, I think that would be a problem. But if they're just on the street, in front of their driveway, I wouldn't see a problem unless they were, parked in the middle of the sidewalk blocking the driveway. But regarding these traffic incidents, there's a lot of collisions. I don't want to take that lightly. A lot of collisions, a lot of people got hurt. I don't know if it has to do with the weather, if any of that data shows that those collisions were happening during when it was raining. Maybe in the future, we could update the report to where it could say if it was raining that day. So we had this many collisions, and they were all on rainy days. And we had this many collisions, on a dry, sunny day. So it'd be kind of neat to know if the collisions were related to the weather being so bad. I could foresee some of those collisions in the storm when it's been raining these past couple months, these heavy storms. So that could be a factor. And what could we do about that, right? Maybe more enforcement. Maybe we could find out where those collisions were happening and the time of the day, and we could make some sort of graph and say, hey, okay, police officers, last couple months we had collisions at around this hour of time of day. can we have more enforcement in that area, kind of thing. I think that could be a good solution. I just want to take note that there were a lot of collisions and a lot of people got hurt. So I don't know what we're going to do about keeping these streets safe and making them safer. But there were pedestrians injured, right? So it could have been someone simply trying to cross San Pablo or cross Solano. And these cars are just driving way too fast. So I don't know if we need to put more stoplights on San Pablo. But every intersection's a stoplight or a stop sign, four-way stop sign. I think the cars go up and down Solano 35, 40, 45 miles an hour, and they drive way too fast. So a couple solutions could be install some more stop signs on San Pablo, a couple more stoplights, and definitely LED push button crosswalks on Solano. And I foresee in the next at least 10, 15 years, we gotta have some push button LED crosswalks on Solano, especially at nighttime. Thank you.
We have no other hands raised at this time.
Thanks for your comments, and there are no other hands raised. Let's bring it back to the commission. I, for one, would love some clarity on parking in front of or blocking a driveway along the street. We had some questions about that. It's my understanding that there is a law in the books that it's illegal for all motorists to block a driveway, but I believe enforcement is mostly complaint-driven in Albany, especially if you're not blocking the sidewalk.
It's been a while since I've looked at the rules on that, but that's my understanding that there is a prohibition in state law for parking in front of a driveway, but I'd have to double check that. It's been a while since I've looked at that. On the enforcement side, I think I'd have to relay to the police department to answer specifics on enforcement policy.
Could you follow up on that for next time? That'd be great. As far as the weather affecting the data that we've seen, I think we were seeing data up through the end of the year at the latest. Presumably that wouldn't be overly affected by the recent weather that we've had.
The reporting was for November and December incidents. That's correct.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that certainly wasn't a huge factor in the data that we saw, which satisfies me, but maybe not our commenter. Were there other commissioner?
Well, there is a website. I'm not sure if it's still operating, but there used to be a website where you could get information about specific collisions throughout
You mean
the
the
area.
Switters site?
Switters, yeah. Is that something we should just announce as a partial answer to the question?
Sure.
Since not every, I mean, what you're looking at in the reports here is aggregated data, which isn't going to have information about what time of day each incident occurred at. But if you wanted to know that, there is a place you can look it up. Do you happen to remember offhand what that is?
What, Switters?
Yeah.
Are you talking about the ISWITRS? Is that's what you're referring to? I can't remember the full name, but yeah, they do have monthly information on where the collision happened. It was either like injured, even including the driver's information and the weather condition time. If you want to look it up.
SWITRS, Statewide Integrated Traffic Records System.
Yes, that's the one.
The best source of viewing that data is put out by Berkeley's Transportation Injury Mapping System, TIMS. If you search for that, that is a much more legible version of the Switters data for people to access. The challenge with that is there is a time lag in what data we see there, which is why we have the monthly provisional data that we present here.
Actually, interesting, I want to add on to that. Before coming here today, I look at SWIR's data and compared with Justin's data, it doesn't align. So it shows like 15 collisions for December, right? It only shows one in SWIR's website. I don't know
Because
how
of
to
the
pronounce
delay,
that.
yeah. Well, and I want to assure everyone that even though we don't look at the details of these accidents on a regular basis, when we do come to projects like the Local Road Safety Plan, the variables like time of day and weather and things are looked at to see if they're significant. So that does go into the data that we use to make decisions.
I'll just chime in that the website that Justin mentioned is really easy. tims.berkeley.edu. And it incorporates the SWITR's data, which the SWITR's data is collected by local police, CHP, everyone. So all of that goes to the state. They consolidate it and then report it back through SWITR's, and then TIMS extracts from that data as well. So definitely a lag. At times it's been as much as a year and a half lag. So if we're only looking at like a month lag and the data's not up to date, that's like a massive improvement. It used to be you would assume at least 6 months. They would collect 6 months and then they send it out in 6-month batches. So, long term, yes, it's good. You're not going to turn around and respond to a crash in like 3 days based on that data. That's when you're going directly to the crash report because it was something significant. But the aggregation of the data gives you good statistics. It gives you good patterns. So even looking at 5 to 10 years worth of data is useful, which I think is consistent with what you said. We're not trying to analyze each and every one of these coming through. We're just looking at the current patterns. That is helpful.
Thank you. Any other commissioner comments? Great. With that, we'll move along. We have one item on our consent calendar tonight, the meeting minutes of December 1st, 2002. And we do have a quorum of attendees from that meeting. Would anybody like to pull this item for discussion? I think we need to ask if the public would like to pull this item and use the raise your hand feature.
Not seeing any hands at the moment.
Not seeing any, okay.
I'd like to move approval of the minutes.
I'll second that.
We have a move and a second. Any further discussion? Could you take a roll vote?
Commissioner Chomsky,
Abstain.
Commissioner Javendel,
Aye.
Commissioner Peng,
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Terrific. I just want to mention that I remain chair until this body acts otherwise, which is why I'm sitting in the seat, even though we've all just changed over. And at the end of the meeting, we'll talk about what we want to do about that, if we want to make a change at this meeting. We're going to move on to item number 5, the discussion and possible action on matters related to, and the first one is our draft local road safety plan draft.
We'll bring up digitally Mark Doty, Senior Planner with TJKM, to present this item.
Hey, Justin, good evening. Rude is actually going to be presenting this for y'all tonight.
Okay.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Would you like me to share my screen, or Justin, are you going to?
I can share it if that's easier for you, either way.
That would be great if you could share it.
I will do that.
Thank you, Michelle. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us today, and thank you for your time. I did kind of hear that there are a lot of concerns about collisions happening day to day and month to month. So I'm hoping that this safety plan would help to rectify some of those issues that we might be having out there. So this is just a continuation of our previous presentation that we had done. And then we did receive a few comments on the draft plan that we submitted. And some of the comments were related to adding some additional information with respect to pedestrian and bicycle collisions, having some more maps included. So I just kind of quickly want to go through that. Next slide, please. So agenda for today, as I mentioned, that there were some community comments and updates that were needed, which were just related to pedestrian and bicycle collisions. And then we're just going to go through the safety projects one more time and then open it up to questions. Next, please. So as you can see, there were quite a few community comments, and we heard them today too, that there are concerns about repeated collisions on Solano Avenue, Marine Avenue, San Pablo Avenue, Buchanan, and so on and so forth. And what this plan did is we have identified a total of 9 projects, and some of these concerns have been, like, we have tried to address some of these concerns with different countermeasures that would help to reduce collisions. What we heard was 29% of the residents were concerned about pedestrian and bicycle and intersection safety on Solano Avenue. 22% of total collisions occurred at intersections, which kind of validates what their concerns were. 11% of residents were also concerned about speeding through the corridor, and 28% of all collisions citywide were caused, and the cause was either visibility or lighting or curves. So that's what we found in the data. Also, 26% of residents were concerned about bicycle and pedestrian safety on other corridors like Marine Avenue and San Pablo. And we have identified some projects that would help us to implement some countermeasures, provided we get necessary funds for them. So next slide, please. We received comments for additional pedestrian collision analysis. So we already had the analysis done, and it was showing that 51% of the pedestrian collisions were due to pedestrian right-of-way violation, where pedestrian right-of-way was violated. And then there were 21% of collisions where pedestrians actually were violators of the rules. So just kind of wanted to bring that up too. And 67% of these collisions did occur at crosswalks and at intersections. Same kind of analysis for bicycle collisions. 18% of bike collisions were caused by automobile right-of-way violation. While turning, probably cars are not looking at approaching bicyclists, so that was one of the major reasons. 61% occurred where party at fault was proceeding straight. And so that means the vehicle is proceeding straight, but there is a bike coming and they are actually not watching for them. And these collisions occurred within 250 feet of the intersection. Nighttime collisions, 26% of pedestrian collisions occurred in low light conditions, as well as 21% of bicycle collisions also occurred during low light conditions. Next, please. So based on the request, we do have some additional maps that we have added to our draft plan. The maps kind of exactly show where these pedestrian bicycle collisions have occurred through the corridor, as well as the intersections. So as you can see, there are quite a few collisions on Solano, San Pablo. So this map kind of gives you a very good representation of where these collisions occurred. Next, please. There was a comment where they also wanted to see the bike and pet collisions kind of superimposed on each other. So here are the two maps that we have prepared, where you have all type of collisions on the left-hand side of this slide, where we show fatal, severe, visible injury, as well as complaint of pain type of collisions for both pedestrian and bicyclists. And on the right side, you see only fatal and severe injury collisions. Now, based on what we heard, based on the analysis, the collision analysis that we did, we came up with 9 very specific projects. And I would be going through each of these projects in detail, but they are kind of listed into signalized intersections, unsignalized intersections. Then we have project 5, 6, and 7, which are more citywide projects that we have identified. So that would be pretty helpful when, we're not just focusing at a particular location, but we are also treating those other locations where we don't see collisions but have similar characteristics. So project 5, 6, and 7 are more of systemic citywide projects that we have identified, and project 8 and 9 are projects that we have identified on roadway segments. Some of the concerns with respect to signals or lighting and having additional safety for pedestrians, that is covered in project 5, 6, and 7. So your citywide signal upgrade would look at all the signalized intersections and see what's missing, and it will upgrade those to bring it to most new standards. Like if they don't have retroreflective borders around it, then that could be one of the improvements that will be considered in the project. Project 6 is more of a citywide streetlight inventory project, where all your streetlights will be evaluated. We would make sure that they are up to the current standards, and wherever they need to be switched or you need additional lights, then that could be done through project number 6. And leading pedestrian interval is a project which is also a citywide project, where before a through movement gets a green, the pedestrian does get the right of way to start first. So they do get a kickstart for 3 or 5 seconds where they are already in the crosswalk before the other conflicting car movements start. So those 3 are more citywide projects. Next slide. Project 1 identifies 6 specific locations where we are proposing improvements. Next slide, please. Here are the 6 intersections that we are proposing that be looked into for improving signal timings. So these intersections should be looked into, whether your all red times, your yellow times are all up to standards. And also we are proposing that we do install some raised pavement markers and striping for additional visibility. There are other non-HSIP countermeasures that we have also identified, like red light enforcement cameras, if we want to install that on Marine and Masonic. We also reviewed some other planned efforts where city has been pretty proactive, and they're working on it, and they are listed in other planned efforts like leading pedestrian interval at San Pablo and SR 123 at Marine Street. And then the public comments are in the last column, where we've just identified what kind of concerns we have heard from community. Next, please. Similar kind of table on project 2. There are, again, the same 6 locations that are identified in project 1, but the countermeasures are a little different. The first one is improving signal hardware at these locations. Second one is installing an advanced stop bar before the crosswalk. that would definitely help with pedestrians, visibility for pedestrians as well as the bicyclists, and modifying the signal phasing to implement leading pedestrian interval. And then there are definitely other planned efforts that are ongoing through Complete Streets, San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street project, and Albany ATP plan. Next, please. So next two projects are specifically for improvements at unsignalized intersections. Again, we do have 5 identified locations. Next, please. And what we are proposing is that these locations be looked at for installing or upgrading signs to larger signs, like larger in size, or if they're missing any signs, then that should be also looked into and installed. We are also proposing to install flashing beacons at stop control intersections. I know there are stop signs, but sometimes, you know, drivers need to be kind of reminded again. So we think that installing flashing beacons would help. Installing splitter islands on minor road approaches, and also at some locations we are proposing to install some raised medians on approaches. Next, please. Next slide, please. Sorry, did I miss? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I think you haven't covered this one yet. They just look similar.
I didn't realize that you already moved to the next slide. Here are 6 locations where we are also proposing to install upgrade pedestrian crossing at uncontrolled locations with some enhanced features. And we are also proposing to install rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Intersection number 6 is highlighted because this intersection got added based on the comments that we have received from the community, and it was not due to any collision history that we have seen, but this intersection came up quite a bit during the comments, so we wanted to include this intersection in this improvement with the NS22 PB improvement, which is installation of rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Next, please. The following 2 projects are specific for roadway segments. And as you can see, we have identified 7 roadway segments to have some countermeasures be implemented. Next, please. Project 8 has 6 of those segments either have an install a median barrier or upgrade the signs with new fluorescent sheeting, install delineators and reflectors. We have also proposed that some of these segments do have edge lines and center lines installed, and just a little bit more kind of a regress countermeasure, which is adding rumble stripes to it. So there are some locations where we are also proposing to have rumble stripe center lines as well as edge lines. Next, please. And the last project is systemic improvement at some of these roadway segments, which include installation of separated bike lanes, installation of raised pedestrian crossings, and rectangular rapid flashing beacon at some of these roadway segments. Next, please. From here, if we have addressed all the comments, then our next step will be just to take this plan to City Council for adoption. And I think with that, we will open up for questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Let's open it up for commissioner questions. Commissioner Peng?
So I noticed the report has collected the data from 2016 to 2020. And then at the beginning of the project, the data for 2021 was preliminary and maybe not complete. And also recorded in your report, you mentioned that the post-2020 collision data will be reviewed and incorporated. I'm wondering, can you tell us more about how the data after 2020 was reviewed and incorporated? By my count, there are 165 collision data after 2020. So I would like to know if there's any change in the trend and the pattern, in 2021 and 2022, because that's when people are in this kind of second year in pandemic. So I assume there will be some changes. Thanks.
Justin, do you want me to answer that, or?
I don't know that we did ask the consultants to revisit the collision data. If it was stated that they were going to take another look at the data analysis, I don't think that would be correct. They took a look in the earlier portion of the planning effort at the data that was available at that time, and we'll continue to bring the commission more up-to-date data as we have it available, but we didn't ask them to go back and do another round of data analysis.
Just to add to that, since LRSP is an ETSIP process, they allow us to take only 5 years worth of data to do the analysis. Also, LRSP is a living document, so your question is very valid. We should keep on looking at the new data that is available and see how are the trends changing or impacting, where we would need additional improvements or additional locations to be identified. But as Justin said, we were not scoped to look at additional data for other years.
Okay, other questions?
Everyone. Looking at Project 8, it looks like line 3 says crossing upgrade, rectangular rapid flashing beacon at Pierce and Buchanan, which, unless I'm confusing myself, is already a traffic signal. I don't think we'd want an RFB there.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's in a non-HISP column, but still, it shouldn't be there.
It should not be there. You're right. We make a note of that.
Any other? Please.
So there's a lot of code numbers here, and I was just, for example, trying to look up what I see under Project 8, it says R03 is install median barrier. And so I opened up the other document, the 200-page document, to try to understand what that means. And I looked up R03 on page 67 of the document. And there it says R03 is improved signal timing. So I'm not sure if all of these codes are being used in exactly the same way between the PDF, the presentation that you just showed us, and the longer document. And I'm wondering how do we get the definitive information about what's meant here?
So R03 is what we are showing on the presentation. The improved signal timing is S03. So I'm thinking that it could have been that there is a typo there.
Okay, so
What page?
I'm looking at the 240-page document and page 79 of the PDF, which is numbered page 67. that's the page number written on the page itself. I see R03 says improve signal timing. And I don't know if this is the only example like that. It's just the one that I happen to be looking at right now. But I'm wondering if there's a version of this countermeasures table that's more definitive than the one that I'm looking at in the 240-page document.
We are going to attach appendix for local road safety manual, and they do have all the codes and the definition of all these countermeasures in that manual, which is actually being published by Caltrans. So that will be also a part of the document.
And just searching for R03 in the document, I now see there's another place where it occurs on page 87 of the PDF where it says R03 add segment lighting, which is yet a third idea of what R03 really means. So it just seems like I appreciate the use of these codes to kind of create a very efficient and concise presentation of what's going where, but it becomes confusing for us when the same code is used to mean different things in different contexts.
We'll definitely look into it and get back to you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you repeat?
No, I'm saying we'll definitely look into it and get back. If those are errors, then they need to be fixed.
Okay. So in the end, when we look through the 240-page document and find multiple references to R03, they should really all be referring to the same treatment, no matter what, no matter where in the document they occur.
That is correct.
Okay.
R03 cannot have different definitions. It has to be the same definition throughout the document.
Okay, so these are just proofreading issues. That it's not a. I was wondering if I was confused about how the documents were organized, but I think it's just a proofreading issue, so I'll let it go for now. Thank you.
That is correct. Those are errors on our part, so it is a proofreading issue, and I'm sorry about that.
And as Rita said, Appendix F in the document at the end has the safety manuals listing of those codes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, I see it in Appendix F now. I'll look to the Appendix F as the more definitive reference for this. Thanks.
Anything else? Harry? No, okay. I had a question. I noticed you included an earlier presentation in the larger document. Will this presentation also be included in the main report?
It would be included in the appendix of the main report. So all the presentations that we have done to the council or Transportation Commission, they all will be included. Not only that, if we have done presentations to stakeholders, then those would be included too.
Great. Well, let's make sure that it's comprehensible. I had a question about on page 4, under nighttime collisions. It says 26% of pedestrian collisions occurred in low light conditions, as well as 21% of bicycle collisions, in line with citywide percentage of 25%. Were you saying that that's in line with overall collisions of all vehicles, or comparable to motorist vehicles, or that wasn't clear to me? Maybe you could work on that.
Yeah, let me look into it and I will get back to you on that
Great.
comment.
Thank you. I have a number of questions, and some of these are probably opinions. But let me just start by saying this is a big document, and there's a lot of information, and I appreciate the work that went into this. Having said that, there were a few, I tended to run into misaligned page references, things that happen during the editing of a document. So when you do your next pass through, please look for those. It's a little disconcerting. I noticed in the presentation you gave tonight that you used a different, let's see, on page 28, figure 17 does not match what you used in the presentation tonight. It's a duplicate of figure 18, or I believe it to be, based on looking at the figures in 30 through 35, which build on that. While we're on this, I'm just going to say that the color choices make the green non-injury collisions easier to see than the yellow injury collisions. To me, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason we used green is because most of the times green gives you an idea of, just like red tells
I
you
understand.
beware of, green is
Sure.
like, don't need to worry about it. So that's the reason we use green, but I do understand what you're saying. And because there were so many data points on each other, we have gone back and forth with these colors and gradients so many times that, since it's just a lot of data on the same map, it was really difficult for us to pick colors that, when they are kind of overlapping on each other, still visible. So after many iterations, these were the 4 colors that were much clearer than any other colors that we had picked before. So, but yeah, if you want us to swap it, we can definitely swap it.
For me, the yellow is very light, so maybe a darker
Darker yellow.
would stand out more. My color vision is terrible, so I'm not the person who.
Well, and there's, as I'm sure you've encountered, there's a whole issue between printed color and screen color,
That's true too.
which make it all even worse. So what if it was just a lighter green? So that there's
Two
more
greens
parity.
would coincide with each other. We tried that too.
Okay.
We tried different shades of green, but when we put 2 different collisions on top of each other, then it was really hard to see a light green and a dark green difference.
Okay. Let's move on from that. On page 34 in figure 20, which involves figure 24, the paragraph as written, the numbers don't match what's in the figure or the table, the figure. Please take a look at that.
Sure.
Page 34, figure 24, and the text.
Could we receive written comments on these? That way we can make sure that we do have a matrix put together and respond back to these comments.
Terrific. I only have a couple more.
Okay.
I want to ask about something I'm a little confused about, which is Table 1 on page 19 of that same large document. I followed the link, and the numbers that are shown in Table 1 actually appear to be from the 2000 census, not from the ACS, the American Community Survey. And there's a link by that table, and you can follow it and see that. And doing a little more research, I believe the actual number of individual commuters is not 58%, but 36%. So that's a significant difference. So if you could take a look at that, please.
Okay.
On page 70, I think there might be some confusion between, or some missubstitution between non-intersection and non-signalized.
What was that page number again? Sorry.
70.
17.
And I'll leave off with that. Were there any more commissioner questions or text questions? No. Okay. So let's open this up to public comment. Please stay with us, and we will take public comment and then answer questions after.
Our first commenter is Jeremiah Pinguelo. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Yep, Jeremiah here. So, you know, I mean, besides color coding and everything and all, I just want to get down to the real nitty gritty. What's the budget each of these projects? I'm going to go straight to project number 6 because that's streetlights. We've got to work on streetlights. Upper Solano or Eastern Solano is just, it's all miscellaneous. You know, the real tall lights up there. I just drove by Solano. Some of them are yellow, some of them are white. It just looks really unorganized. So what's the budget for each of these projects for the streetlights? And where is that money coming from for each project? So say streetlights. You know, we got $400,000 to do streetlights on Solano. Okay, so where's the money coming from? If we're doing any improvements on San Pablo's a state highway, so hopefully there's a budget coming from Caltrans that we could dip into or apply for some grants, grants.com or California, you know, Department of Transportation, sort of grants for anything happening on San Pablo. The state should be paying for that, number one. So it'd be nice to know what the budgets are for each of these projects and then where the money's coming from. I want to focus on streetlights, number 6, because very important. The ones on Eastern Solano, they're really tall. They're about a good 50 feet in the air. And they're very far away from the actual street and the sidewalk. And the luminosity finishes the more feet away it is. The streetlights on Lower Solano or Western Solano, they're really close to the ground. They're maybe, 12 feet tall, 14 feet tall. And they're LED, and they're bright. It lights up the sidewalks really well. And they look really nice. We're able to decorate them with lights during the holidays to wrap around the poles. The street lights on Eastern Solano, they look like they're from the 60s or 70s. And you've got these big circle globes. They look like a disco ball, right? They look like they're 50 years old. So yeah, I want to focus on project number 6. Get Solano nice and neat, organized. That way Solano looks uniform. Solano looks organized. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments.
Our next speaker is Carrie Schulman. Please go ahead.
Hello. I was wondering, it's not clear to me what the prioritization is for these projects. I'm guessing that it's project 1 is highest priority, and it goes down from there. I get get that, I think in the last meeting, it was mentioned that like the signalized intersections are the easiest improvement. So that makes sense to like do those first because those are really easy to do. But I'm sad to see that the pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements are project 9 at the very end of the list. So I hope that that doesn't mean they're in the last and they might never actually get implemented. And I also wanted to mention that I see a lot of listings about complaints about specific intersections. And so those intersections are prioritized as having being fixed first. But I think that's kind of missing the big picture because, for example, if a lot of people complain about crossing at Marin, crossing San Pablo at Marin, well, that's because there's a light there. And so that's a quasi-safe place to cross, even though it's not really safe. But, you know, if that crossing, you know, if you looked at the bigger picture, you could have that Washington crossing added. And that would solve a lot of the complaints that were logged at Marin Avenue. So I just want to make sure the big picture isn't lost when you're looking at number of complaints per intersection, because sometimes the solution might actually be at a different intersection. And lastly, I know I mentioned this already tonight about Washington Avenue, but I was so excited to see that on the presentation at the last meeting, and I'm not seeing that in this presentation now, and maybe it's just kind of deep in it, and it's kind of mixed into other project improvements, or maybe it actually got removed completely, but I really hope it didn't, because I think that's such a vital improvement for pedestrian and bicycle safety. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no other hands raised at this time.
Okay. So I'm going to defer the inquiry about streetlights to a later item in our agenda. And there were a couple questions about prioritization and budget. And that would staff like to address that or take a stab at that? If not, I will.
Yeah, I can say that part of the plan does look at costs and does a benefit cost analysis, which is one of the framing criteria for some of the grant sources we would be looking to. So it does enough of a cost estimation to have that review to see how we might be competitive for certain grant funding by that metric. Beyond that, we will be taking this information and looking at our upcoming planning and prioritization for this commission and projects that we develop in our capital improvement planning process, as well as in active transportation plan update. We'll be using this analysis and this data in that effort as well.
Great. Yeah, this process is based on a $40,000 grant and is meant to identify locations that we need to address and issues that we need to address. It's not meant to immediately form a set of priorities and have the city marching orders. And while fund sources are identified in this document, those still have to be applied for, and it's still a multi-year process.
So just to clarify, there was a question about whether Project 1 takes precedence over Project 2 and Project 8 is the lowest priority, but that's not the case, right?
They're not in order of
correct.
prioritization.
Okay.
That's correct. And the speaker should reach out to me, my contact information on the website, for specifics of the intersection that she's speaking to, because there is, separate from this process, this body and project development specific for that.
So, I mean, this is such a long list of locations and ideas for improvements. How, beyond us on the commission just waiting for staff to bring us proposals to work on, one of the 200 things mentioned here, is there some bigger picture of taking the long list of projects here and deciding which ones warrant attention in the coming year or in the coming 5 years, and how can the public get involved in that process?
This body will be having a work planning discussion in not too long. I think that will be one opportunity for us to set our priorities for projects that we're developing in the shorter term. Beyond that, staff has projects in the queue, and we are looking to see where these recommendations fit into that, into existing projects.
So some of the ideas recommended here may already be in the works, and others are new ideas that nobody's really considered yet. And when it comes to setting up the work plan for this body, that's when we'll choose which of the many, many projects listed here we might want to try to take on in the next couple of years. So if people want to be involved in prioritizing that, they should try to attend the meeting of this commission where we are preparing our work plan. Is that correct?
Yes, I think there will be city council level strategic planning with the new council, and there will be work plans by the advisory bodies.
Okay. So if you read the agenda and it says the commission will be preparing its work plan or deciding on its work plan, that sounds very dry, but that's actually the key moment when people who are passionate about one project or another need to show up and say, let's get this on the work plan, because if it doesn't get on the work plan, we're not going to look at it.
Fair enough. Other commissioner comments, opinions about this plan? As I said before, there's a lot of work in here, and it was only a $40,000 grant. I think we're getting pretty good value here. It's not perfect, perhaps, but it's getting there, and they have some more time to work on it. I would love to see in the final report a little more regular explanation of acronyms. It took me a long time to find what EPDO meant when I just dived into the middle. And this document is going to be used that way as a sort of a point, dive-in reference, not a read-through reference. So help us out. The report refers to Albany as a 5.4 square mile city, but that includes all of the water that goes all the way out to the county of San Francisco. City and County of San Francisco. And it might be more appropriate to talk about the 1.8 square miles of land or so that we have. That might be a little more appropriate size-wise for what we're talking about, and might help us with granting in the future, because it affects our tax base and all sorts of things. The Albany Climate Action Plan is not mentioned as one of the supporting documents. I would suggest that it should be, because it drives our choices. Could we look at page 57 and the prioritization of road segments? I believe is on that page.
So I can pull that up in just a moment.
Just to make sure we're clear, when you say page 57, you mean page 57 of the PDF, which is labeled page number 56?
That's entirely possible, yes.
Okay.
I was going by the page number of the document in the
In your PDF reader.
in the online PDF visualizer from the city.
Okay, yeah, that,
Is the page on the screen the one you're talking about?
Yes, I believe it is.
okay.
So could you blow up the table? So it's true that we have very few deaths, thankfully, and our total severe injury, total number of severe injury collisions is quite low. Actually, this is high injury intersections. I think I was looking for road segments. Yeah, corridors, there we go. So E and F are examples of very low total injury collisions, 1 each, and very low severe injury locations. And these streets don't quite fit in to the magnitude that we're seeing on other streets. And I'm not sure they should be prioritized. And I forget which page had the map that showed this high injury corridor. But
I think it's about 2 pages before this one.
pages before, okay?
55.
Yeah, so, so these two roads are actually quite close to one another there in the center of the image, and the section of Washington labeled as F is a place that we've actually worked on recently, more recently than some of the data, I believe. And Madison, I don't believe, is a very high volume street. It's not unique in terms of where it goes and what it connects. And it's also not significant in terms of connecting to major features like the hillside or the upper reaches of the hillside or to Buchanan. So I'm wondering what other commissioners think about including these streets or not in the high injury prioritized network.
Can I add something, like a little bit of clarification on the high injury network? How did it come up?
Please.
So there is, just like you said, the EPDO methodology, right, that we have to follow, which is the Caltrans guidelines to LRSP. Now, if you look at the corridor ranking table, as you can see, that like anyone could think that when G has total of 12 collisions, why is it G and not E and F when the total number of collisions are higher? The problem is that every time you have a fatal or severe injury collision, it just automatically through the methodology gets ranked higher than the total number of collisions that particular segment is seeing, since it does have a fatal or a severe injury collision. So that's the only reason why, sometimes you think that, oh, there are very many collisions on other corridors, but they're not coming up in this list. But the corridors that have probably one fatal collision or severe injury collision, that is coming up. It's just the methodology that Caltrans has us follow for LRSP.
Okay.
I think from the point of view of statistical analysis, we're dealing with the problem of small numbers. Most of our street segments have 0 severe collisions, severe injury or fatality collisions. A few of them have 1, and the ones that have 1 kind of automatically get promoted to this category of high injury, even if they have 1 or more serious fatality or high injury collisions. But statistically, it's not clear how significant that is. Did that happen because there's something wrong with the corridor and it needs our attention from a city planning point of view, or did that happen because somebody was doing something right there that happened to have a bad consequence, and it could have happened anywhere? It could have happened on a cul-de-sac. It's really hard to know. If we were dealing with cases where there were 10 serious injuries on some corridors and 20 on others, I think we could say realistically that the ones with 20 need our attention more than the ones with 10. But when it's the difference between 1 and 0, it's very hard to judge whether that's meaningful.
Just want to add to that. I just look at the 2021 data of all the injured collisions. None of those intersections have any issue. So I agree with you that maybe that's the reason why we need to look not just at 5 years of data. We need to accumulate more data so we can know which is more statistically prominent in terms of that. So maybe in our active transportation plan update, we can look at the longer data and incorporate this. Personally, I agree with you. Maybe we should take out those two.
Well, we're constrained somewhat by the Caltran requirements. I think it, as you say, it behooves us to keep these things in mind. And I would also include keeping in mind that the Caltrans definition of what happens in an intersection is anything within 250 feet of an intersection, which includes the entire stretch of almost all of our east-west roads. So it's good that we have at least 3 commissioners continuing, and we can keep this sort of thing and the others in mind. My big other thing, and I did get an email to you just now, I think, that I've been talking about over the course of this report is, how we've had this opportunity to solicit community information, and I'm seeing that being integrated in, especially in the tables that are in the presentation. They're not actually in the tables that look at the costs in the actual report on the recommended programs. Can you get that any larger? Can you go full screen? So on the left is the reported injury network with severity, and on the bottom right is the community input locations. And this is very rough, and I don't actually even own a copy of Photoshop anymore, so it's kind of rough. But you can see that there aren't a lot of dots in this area of the reported injuries, and that's true even off of what you can see here up along Brighton. There are a couple, but down here, there's what to me is kind of a collection on Brighton. There's a collection here on Portland. These are people's concerns. This is the black hole in the data of where people don't like to go because of perceived danger. And I think we really want to keep these things in mind, especially since we've collected this information. You can't see it very well here, but I've got a red box enclosing that as one area. Another one is down here on Santa Fe, and that's actually been captured reasonably well because Santa Fe is one of the corridors to look at. But what's not captured is this interest at closer down to the border and over the border with Berkeley, where there's one dot here and several dots here. Another area where there's a big difference is here on the on East Shore and on wow, names fail me, but the comparable road above that, and the whole interface with Buchanan, and then even out here at the bulb. We've got a couple of data points, and there just aren't any in the collision data. These are community concerns, and I think we'd be well served to keep them in mind. I understand that this is a data-based report, and it's hard to capture locational public complaints that are not specific to crashes that are reported. But this is anecdotally, I have heard from motorists who don't like to use the intersection of Masonic and Brighton because it's a heavily trafficked intersection close to the middle school. One lady told me she won't go there because she's afraid she's going to run over somebody. So this is a combination of pedestrians and cyclists and scooter users and motorists. And I still have not seen this kind of variance spelled out directly in the report. And So I just want to put that out there. Are there any other comments from the commissioners? Do commissioners feel ready to recommend this report to City Council?
I think with the note that, as Commissioner Chomsky's pointed out, that there needs to be some proofreading, given that, it seems to be in pretty good shape. I think that relative to the point that there are some data anomalies where, roadway segment or an intersection with a single severe crash makes it into the high injury network, that doesn't necessarily translate into that becoming our priority location to do a project. We will obviously try to do the ones that have the greater number of projects. So the fact that the data is a little bit anomalous in showing those, then it's just a statistical blip, which I hate to even use that word because fatal or severe injury is not something to be trivialized. They all matter. But in terms of focusing our efforts where we have the maximum potential to do benefit, we're going to look at the higher number locations. That's where our grant applications are going to be more successful. So I think that the concern is somewhat corrected by the subsequent process, and that's what makes me comfortable moving on, recognizing how this will get used.
I think that's well said.
So the recommendation suggests that we basically approve this from our commission and encourage the city council to approve it, but we've also talked about a few changes. Ken, you mentioned a couple of things that you detailed changes that you'd like to see, and we've talked about the proofreading issues. So what can we recommend tonight, or do we need to see this again, or can we simply recommend that it be forwarded to the city council after making the changes we've discussed?
I think we can just allow them to proofread it and send it to the council. No need to come back again. So at least this will speed up the process.
I think we could recommend that that if staff is satisfied with the proofreading and the addressing of the issues raised in this meeting, that we are ready to recommend it to City Council.
Is that a motion?
I would actually, in this case, I would be interested in making the motion, and I would add the flavor of what Fareed was saying, if that's acceptable. So the Transportation Commission would like to recommend this, let's see, what wording do they use? Would recommend that the City Council adopt the Local Roadway Safety Plan, providing that it is proofread and the issues raised in this meeting are addressed to the satisfaction of staff, and with the understanding that this kind of raw number crunching is a great input to our processes and our prioritization, but that the commissioners feel that we will need to remember to look back at the details and understand that some of the numbers are based on very little data, and that there are issues that may be better or less identified by the pure data.
I can second that.
Please.
I'm wondering if we can find a more concise way to express the final.
You're welcome to try.
So yeah, the part about adopting and proofreading and incorporating the comments tonight, I would keep what Ken said. For the last part, how can we say it? Simply that the commission acknowledges that the statistical data in the report needs to be tempered with an understanding of the facts on the ground. Does that get the point across enough? Or can someone else want to take a stab at it?
He's working on it.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate what we're trying to say and trying to say it concisely. And yeah, that the implementation be tempered by an understanding of significance of the data points that are being used. In other words, a data point that shows up because it made it onto the chart is not as significant as a location with multiple data points. I'm not being clear enough. I'm being overly concise.
Well, wait, I liked your first sentence. The first sentence sounded good, right? But we need to add to that.
Yeah. So the point of understanding the facts on the ground, that's applying a qualitative filter in my mind. It's not just raw numbers, but the fact is that if Marin Avenue's got 12 injury collisions, but none of them are severe, do we just say, hey, that's less important than a location with one severe injury that might never happen again in 100 years while Marin Avenue continues to stack up those numbers?
Yeah.
Some of it is a question of relative significance of the data points.
So maybe it's a difference between the absolute numbers and the understanding of the balance of numbers and reality on the street.
Yeah, I mean, a pragmatic way is that we would still prioritize implementation of the locations with the greatest number of collisions.
I'm not even sure I want to be that. I'm
No,
not sure I want to be
because-
that specific.
You know,
I think I'd rather. What I want to express
Everyone
is.
should
Yeah, go ahead.
The commission acknowledged the limitation of this study, and in the future, we need to revisit the statistics and the methodology instead of using the result blindly.
Yeah?
I like
So
that.
that's in addition to the first part.
Right. The first part of what you said, plus yeah. So
So I'm taking that as a friendly amendment to replace my second part, yes.
are you able to read that whole thing back to us before we take a vote?
No is an acceptable answer.
We can take another stab if you would like.
I need the part from Commissioner Pang that was being kept out of the last part he said.
So on top of the first point of what Ken said, this commission acknowledged the limitation of this report. And in the future, we need to revisit the statistics and the methodology of this report instead of using the result blindly.
So I will accept that friendly amendment. I will say that none of this, that conjunction addresses the issue of community input that was not captured in the statistics.
Can I make one suggestion? You're welcome to ignore it, but rather than to fold in additional methodologies in the future, what about discuss how your intent is to prioritize with this information and as well as information gathered in our other plans and planning efforts? Not say that we might not be able to say an update to the local road safety plan can change the methodology because it's prescribed, but we have more flexibility in an active transportation plan update or in our other prioritization decisions that we make.
in a simple way that the future prioritization should take into account the limitations in the methodology. And that's not telling us what to do, but that is acknowledging that we know that the numbers can be misleading, and when we're prioritizing, we should take that into account.
Yeah, I think that gets to the core of the issue. So now, do you have something that you can read back to us?
So the motion would be for the Transportation Commission to recommend that the City Council adopt the Local Road Safety Plan with the amendments regarding the proofreading and incorporating comments at this meeting, and that future prioritization of projects take into account the limits of this methodology. Did I miss a piece in there?
I missed the last few words at the end.
And that future prioritization of projects take into account the limitations of this methodology.
I accept those friendly amendments. Do you, as second?
Second, yes.
Second accepts the friendly amendments. If there's no further discussion, we'll take a roll call vote.
Commissioner Chomsky.
Yes.
Commissioner Javandel.
Aye.
Commissioner Peng.
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great.
Thank
you
you,
for that
Ruta,
presentation.
Mark, and Hamangi.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I would really like to apologize one more time for the typos and inconsistencies, and we'll go through the entire report one more time and make sure that all those are rectified. So my apologies for that.
It's a long document. Thank you for all your work.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great evening.
And I'll just note that we'll leave the document up for public review and comment for, I believe, 3 more weeks. We posted on the website February 17th, and we'll send it out in e-news. So we'll continue to collect feedback as we make the revisions.
Okay. What level would those have to raise to come back to the commission?
If there are substantive changes, we will bring it back to the commission.
Okay. Great. Thank you. With that, and with staff waiting, we'd like to move on to the Sidewalk Repair Program. You need a break? Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break. Just Was there something that changed with the viewer? I used to be able to click on a line item in the agenda and the attachments would pop down. That no longer happens. I have to go onto the separate page and open the drop down for attachments to see if there's anything. So I'm on the HTML agenda. I click on the agenda item, and it used to, right? It doesn't. Oh, it's working for Harry, so it's just me.
I didn't even know about that feature. I was always, the problem is that the cursor doesn't show up as a pointer, so it doesn't encourage you to click on it.
Right.
But if
Oh, it's working for me now.
yes, you get the
I must have needed to reboot Chrome or something. It was a me problem. Please ignore it. Thank you. You're sticking around afterwards, right? We got to get started again. So we're moving on to item number 5.2, as soon as staff is prepared.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Glad to see some commissioners.
Please do introduce yourself when you get back on mic.
I'm James Sorelli. I'm Associate Engineer with Public Works, and it's great to see some of the commissioners' faces in person. Tonight, we'll be talking about the Sidewalk Repair Program, an update with the critical repairs, as well as the Phase 7 scope. So the agenda is I'll real briefly go over the sidewalk program history, then I will get into specifics on the critical repair plan updates, where we've done repairs, upcoming repairs, and how many we have left in our current budget. And then I'll get into the Phase 7 scope, the typical where we're repairing in the schedule, and some more unique things where we're looking at some of these repair locations more holistically, including a pilot curb and gutter pass-through bulb out. So I put together a history because I wasn't sure who was going to be on commission this year. The majority of the commission here has been involved with Phase 6 as well as Phase 5. So I really just want to go over the history just so everyone's on the same page and not so much get into the specifics of the prioritization criteria again, because it has been addressed pretty in depth in the past two presentations. So quick overview is back in 2016, Measure P1 passed. We started the Sidewalk Repair Program as a parcel tax-funded program. The Transportation Commission prioritized repairs along the active transportation plan's priority sidewalk network. This was during Phase 1, Phase 2, and Phase 3. And for Phase 4, the commission started moving at severe issues regardless of location in the city, and only prioritizing moderate issues if they were on the ATP network. And concurrently with the Phase 4 construction, the city hired beneficial designs and ADA specialists to do a comprehensive sidewalk survey for the entire city. This helped us move away from a complaint-driven database and into a comprehensive citywide database. So last year, we came to commission and commission approved the critical repair prioritization criteria. These were basically the worst of the worst issues in the city. And while we were doing that Phase 5 construction, we had a more thorough review of the data and got a final critical repair list compiled, which was approved for Phase 6, prior to Phase 6, where we talked about how we will be taking Phase 6 through 8 to address the remaining critical repairs. So the next two slides I'm just going to skip because it was talking about who was doing the survey and what were the two categories we used. These are really detailed well in Phase 6's presentation, and I don't want to repeat in the interest of time. So getting straight into our update for the critical repairs. So Phase 5, we were looking at some of the most severe issues. And the remaining severe issues will be done Phase 6, Phase 7, Phase 8. Phase 6 is Zone 1 and Zone 5, which was the west and southwest part of the city. Phase 7, which is upcoming, is focusing on the northeast side of the city. And then Phase 8, is in Zone 4 on the southeast side of the city. So we completed Phase 5 in August of last year, and we completed Phase 6 in November. It was a total of 82 locations, 75 of which were critical repairs. There are a few critical repairs remaining in Zone 1 and Zone 5. 1134 Santa Fe is one of them. This is kind of where Santa Fe and Key Route meet, that triangle you might be aware of. Due to where the repair would be situated, we would need to do curb ramp upgrades. So we originally pushed it back to a paving project, but we're not, these streets aren't currently paving candidates. So we've begun looking at it, and it's going to be considered in phase 8. And because of the other work that we'll need to do, specifically the curb ramp upgrades, we will be bringing this back to commission later this spring. And it's also a little bit more complicated because there's the Santa Fe calming. This is the only of these triangle intersections that doesn't have a concrete median island. Where we situate these curb ramps, there's a lot more complications, so we will be looking at this doing in a future phase, and we'll be back this spring to kind of give some conceptual ideas. 507, 509 Adams, this is the east side of the 500 block of Adams. This is where the Albany Bowl development is going in. They basically are going to tear up the sidewalks because these are situated where the townhomes are. We don't want to fix sidewalks for them to get torn up in a few years, especially this is also a dead-end sidewalk, doesn't lead anywhere. So in the effort to save some money, we're going to have the Albany Bowl handle this. And then lastly, 752 and 1111 San Pablo. These are two locations that Caltrans already has plans to fix them. They have an upcoming ADA improvement project along this corridor. They are the better party to handle this. This is their right-of-way. They can do it much more streamlined than we are. So with that in mind, since they already are looking to repair it, they will, we're leaving it to Caltrans.
Question before we leave the slide? You alluded to a future design for the Santa Fe Key Route area?
Just specifically so we know where we're going to situate the curb ramps in the future, so that way we can get the sidewalk repair done. Because we will be upgrading the curb ramps. We just don't we don't know at this time when we will bring that to commission to discuss.
Okay.
But it will be a separate item.
Thank you.
So what we spoke about in July is we are doing some of these critical repairs where possible outside the sidewalk program, where we're doing work. So we've completed 12 that didn't utilize sidewalk monies. Most of it was during paving projects. We've also done some during sewer project. And PG&E actually did a couple during their emergency work along Pierce Street. So overall, we're about halfway done with the critical repairs, and the next two phases will be substantially complete. We'll still have some left. And if you have some eagle eyes, you might notice that the total locations is different than when I presented in July. July said 189. I'll get to the specifics to that later, but basically there were 2 on the map that shouldn't have been on the map when we had done the review. They should have been removed. They just were accidentally left on, and I'll detail why they were removed later.
For those not remembering what no
Yes.
but?
So critical, no BBOT, no best path of travel. That was one of the categories for what's considered a critical repair. And critical no PAR is no pedestrian access route. Those are the acronym definitions.
Thank you.
So this is just kind of map. Bit hard to see with the lighting in here, but red is where we have repairs remaining, green and blue are where we've done repairs. And I just want to bring this up again, that the number of locations isn't the number of property repairs. So before we had this comprehensive data, we tracked repairs based on property addresses, but now we have specific point data. And just so we continue to compare apples to apples in the future, we're going to be listing repairs as property addresses. So there might be just some discrepancies when you look at the number of locations versus the number of properties, because one property might have 2 issues, or 2 properties might just share 1 issue because it's on the property lines. So outside the program, we're in phase 2 paving. We're going to do 8 critical repairs. These will all use paving monies. This will not use sidewalk monies. These would otherwise be completed during phase 8, but to minimize neighborhood disruption and expedite delivery, we're going to get them out of the way during the marine project. And to be clear, this is marine phase 2. What I mean by that, this is east of what's currently under construction. So all these repairs are east of Masonic Key Route area. Budget, without getting into too specifics, we're looking great. Phase 5 and 6 were under estimate. That's partially because we got a very competitive bid price for the repairs. And I overestimated some of the quantities for Phase 5, which gave us a little cushion for that project. So with the estimates in mind, for the next 2 phases, we have a healthy amount of money going forward, especially since we're folding some of these into other programs, as I described previously. So with that update, we'll get into the Phase 7 scope. So we're looking at 51 repair locations. The focus will be in Zone 2 and Zone 3, and as I said, that's the northeast part of the city. We'll also repair some of the postponed Phase 5 and Phase 6 locations, which I'll mention. And 3 special access needs issues have come up since the last planning process, and they will be included. So what's excluded in these zones is 537 Cornell, 625 Evelyn. These were the 2 I mentioned earlier that were removed. 537 Cornell was actually already repaired. It shouldn't have been on the list. And 625 Evelyn wasn't considered a critical repair after review. It did not meet the 2-inch offset at the time. So just as a quick refresher, back in June, and we talked in the July presentation, we field reviewed every single critical repair location to make sure that beneficial designs recorded data matched what was in the field. And generally it did, but there were some discrepancies. The 600 block of Key Route, there's a median you might be aware of. There's a critical repair there, but because it's adjacent to the curb ramps, we would have to do curb ramp upgrades with this, and it's already planned on being addressed during the Key Route project, so we're pushing it to that project to get it done. 807 Ramona, it was determined that this could be done by shaving. We will be doing Zone 3 sidewalk shaving in a few months, and if for whatever reason the shaving company determines that it can't be shaved, we will then bring it back to be fixed in Phase 8. And lastly, there's another San Pablo location in this zone. And as I've kind of talked about before, Caltrans is the better party to address the issue. And they've already identified it, that they will be repairing it. So here is our repair list. Just give me a second. So 5 of these are postponed locations from previous phases: 948 Masonic, 1122 Masonic, 555 Pierce, 995 Stanage, and 716 Solano. These will be done during this phase. 716 Solano, I will probably get pushed to Phase 8. The property owner has been very unresponsive. There's a tree at the back of sidewalk that's an issue with the repair, and we need to kind of talk through that. But otherwise, all of these should be repaired during Phase 7. So just a map to kind of visually orient where these repairs are. As I mentioned, they're focusing up in that northeast corner of the city. Any of the red that you see outside of that is the postponed locations. So something new we're doing going forward is holistic repairs, is what we're calling them. So as you know, a lot of these sidewalk repair locations are as a result of the street tree causing damage to the sidewalk. And some of these street trees are causing damage beyond the sidewalk. So while we have a contractor mobilized in these locations, rather than just fix the sidewalk, we're looking at fixing the sidewalk, the curb, the gutter, and some of the roadway while we're there, and get it all done at once rather than coordinating different programs to get it done. And to be clear, the work outside the sidewalk extent will use different funding. It won't use sidewalk Measure P1 money, just so that's clear. And another thing I wanted to bring up, especially in these neighborhoods, the northeast part of the city, there's been a lot of tree removals in the past, and particularly there's been, when these tree removals have come to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission meetings, there's been a lot of opposition to the tree removals, including an appeal to council once. So with that in mind, we really are trying to work around these trees the best that we can. So there's 6 holistic repairs we're looking at. 2 are pretty simple, just quick curb and gutter, nothing special. 2 are site-specific designs. These will be brought again to commission next month. 1501 Washington, because of the extent of sidewalks and street repairs we're doing, we're going to have, if you're familiar with St. Albans, it's at the intersection, it's right at the corner, so it's adjacent to a curb ramp, so it's going to trigger curb ramp upgrades, which obviously we need to bring to commission before we do. And there's some other features there that we'll discuss next month. 602 Santa Fe, it's a camphor tree that's bringing up, if you're familiar how sometimes their roots grow and it kind of raises the elevation of the sidewalk. This is a rare opportunity where we actually have enough room to continue ramping over a tree. Typically, because of lot sizes, ramps are infeasible because we're crossing driveways, so those need to be level, or we're crossing entrances to homes, and that needs to be level. This is one location where we can actually ramp to keep the tree in place. However, we do need a topo survey to determine how far we're going to make sure it's an ADA compliant 5% slope. And also that the drainage will work without a major bulb. And depending on the size of the bulb, it may require a red curb, which is why we may need to bring it, which we will probably be bringing it back again next month. Lastly are the 405 Canes and 805 San Carlos. We're going to discuss a pilot curb and gutter pass-through bulb out to address issues there. So these curb and gutter pass-through bulb outs are specifically where a street tree has not only damaged the sidewalk, but the curb, gutter, and potentially the road. The curb can't be repaired in place without either bulbing it or removing the tree. And it's a flat street where bulbing the curb may complicate drainage. Actually, both of these areas had a decent amount of ponding after the recent storms, and they stayed there for a while. And while it was a combination of the roots, and it was also an issue with the curb and the fact that it's a pretty flat street. So these pass-through bulb outs would allow drainage to flow as desired, and it would create space for the roots to grow without damaging the road or causing those those hazards that are generally limited to the shoulder, but still there. However, because of the space that we need to install these, there's some dedicated right-of-way space within the roadway, specifically the shoulder or what's referred to as the parking lane. And we would need to red curb to, one, make sure people aren't parking next to the bulb outs into the roadway, and also to make sure that they're away from the inlets and outlets of this bulb out. Otherwise, it's not working because it's plugged. So this is, I don't want to get too much into this draft engineering detail. I kind of want to focus on the plan view, and I want to draw attention to this detail C. This is what I mean by a pass-through bulb out right here, where the bulb is disconnected from the curb. That allows water to flow along the curb line as originally intended. We are removing a portion of the curb adjacent to the tree because we can't physically put it back because of how much it's either eaten or grown over the curb. So effectively, we have what looks like a natural bulb out. It's just disconnected from the curb. There's some decomposed granite and some aggregate in the bulb out itself that will allow for us to have minimal root work when we're doing this work. We don't have to cut and trim or prune roots to get the right amount of base in before we lay the concrete over, et cetera. And this will also give it area to grow up and not damage the road. It would grow within this bulb. But really, I kind of want to mostly focus that plan view, how it will require the red curb. And I'll get to a bit more of a visual and picture kind of look. But the first one we're looking at is 405 Canes. And there's ultimately 3 ways we can do these sidewalk repairs. We are recommending this pilot curb and gutter pass-through bulb out, or what we call the holistic approach. If commission deems otherwise, we can approach it as a reset where we remove the tree and replace it and reset everything and repair it per standards. But I do want to kind of go back to the point that this will require pros commission approval, and there has been a lot of opposition to any tree removals. We also can just repair the sidewalk and leave these issues for a future date. It would probably need to be repaired if there was an incident or during paving design. Well, this street is not being considered right now for rehab, and just because it's being considered later for this repair doesn't mean it will be any different than what we're proposing today. So we ultimately do recommend the curb and gutter pass-through bulb out. Sorry, it's a mouthful. So this is kind of what it would look like in the street. We will, for 4 or 5 canes, we would retain the blue curb. It'd actually improve a little bit the conditions on the north end of it. It would retain a standard amount of space for a car on the north end, but it would require about 16 linear feet at the tree, which would remove a potential parking space. So similarly, yeah, yes.
How would that be marked for nighttime visibility?
Well, these won't be extending into the roadway, and it'd be like a standard curb. When it's constructed, it'd be a lot more visible because it has the concrete flare to it. It'll be red curb, but if you do believe visibility is a concern, we can place some kind of a flex post or something like that, or kind of.
This came up, there used to be, in the chicanes on Santa Fe, there used to be a bulb out mid-block on the eastern side of Santa Fe. It was an area that sometimes had no parking, and there was actually a crash, single vehicle crash, when a scooter user who was riding in the curb area, hit that bulb out because they couldn't see it at night.
We can consider that. There is the potential to put reflectors embedded into the concrete. That's a potential idea. Or we can have cones temporarily just to kind of say that this is a new condition, but we can talk internally about different ideas for that. But generally, this area is pretty parked up because there's not a lot of parking. So I don't foresee other. 24
hours or daytime or?
I would see it as a potential issue during sweeping days when they're, but if we can look into it, but I think putting some kind of reflective material could probably help solve that.
And if this is a pilot, it seems worth thinking about how to make it applicable to other places where there might be less parking utilization and active transportation users would be more likely to be traveling in that parking lane.
Yes, yeah. It's a good point that you bring up as a pilot is, a lot of times you do see these kind of bulb outs as green, as like stormwater gardens. This is kind of the first time where it's more a little untraditional, where we're just kind of using it as a pass-through bulb out. So as a pilot, we're going to be watching it. We're going to be watching drainage, but if there's other safety concerns like this, these are things we can fix or look at fixes for. In worst case, if it does become a safety hazard, we will tear it out. We're hoping it doesn't get that far, but obviously, if it's a safety concern, we will definitely address it. But I do appreciate bringing that up. We will talk about reflective material at the edges.
Can I ask more about this slide before you move on?
Yeah.
So I can't really see the sidewalk much in this picture, but is the path of travel of sidewalk users just a straight line here, or are they being directed around the tree as well?
It slightly curves, and we'll retain a curve around the tree. It is hard to see the sidewalk, but yeah, there's this sidewalk. There's a slight curve around the tree. I believe there's a slope issue right now and some discontinuity.
Is the sidewalk already making a curve around the tree, or is that something?
They repaired it at one time in the past, yes.
So it already deviates slightly to make a curve around the tree?
Yes, but it maintains the 4 foot, minimum 4 feet path of travel still.
And have the roots of the tree been damaging the sidewalk in the configuration that it's in now, or is most of the damage happening in the roadway?
There's both. That's why, one reason we're repairing the sidewalk is because of the damage of the tree, and the second is because we're repairing the curb and gutter and street is because of the tree roots as well.
Okay, so the repair to the sidewalk is being done in the traditional way, there's nothing experimental about that.
No, we just, we'll be putting wire meshes in, which is a standard that probably wasn't done because I believe this was not a city repair in the past. But otherwise, nothing, it'll be a pretty standard
Okay,
sidewalk repair.
so the experimental part of the treatment involves what you're doing on the curb itself and the roadway just outside.
Yes, we have a lot more right-of-way flexibility here to
Yeah.
kind of think outside the box.
So just to be clear that this experimental treatment doesn't really affect the way you repair the sidewalk.
No, and that's why I said there is always the option that we just do the sidewalk repair and ignore this, but we are recommending this pilot curb and gutter pass-through bulb out. So going on 805 San Carlos, we're recommending the same holistic approach idea of curb and gutter pass-through bulb out. The only difference here is the amount of red curb that it will require. So here, we need this about 16 linear feet of red curb. The issue arises on the north end is we're getting to a very small amount of space left between the driveway and the red curb, the minimum red curb required. So if we did 16 feet, we would only have about 14 feet to the driveway flare, which, if you're giving 2 feet of buffer from the driveway, that's only a 12-foot parking space. California Building Code California Building Code says that for a compact car parking space, you need at least 15-foot length. So really, the only things you could park here is a Fiat or a smart car. No compact car otherwise could fit here. So since it's not meeting code, Public Works, we're recommending a 30 linear foot red curb here, which would be more, a bit more. But we definitely foresee some issues with this driveway being parked. It's already a very narrow approach. Hard to tell from this picture, but it's a pretty narrow approach to begin with, and we don't want to complicate their driveway. And more importantly, the space left is not to a compact car parking code per CBC. So the timeline for Phase 7, we're looking at getting it out to bid at the end of next month. We will be bringing back those 2 site-specific designs to Transportation Commission next month. If for whatever reason there's some significant feedback, they might be pushed into Phase 8, but as of right now, we're trying to plan for them to be part of Phase 7. The hope is if bidding goes well, we can award in April, begin construction in May, and have the project hopefully wrapped up by the end of July. So looking forward, next month we'll be back to talk about 1501 Washington and 602 Santa Fe. We will give another progress update of critical repairs during the approval of Phase 8. We're tentatively looking at July commission for that. So by the end of this year, we'll have most of the critical repair locations finished. So we really do need to start rethinking the prioritization criteria for Phase 9+. And outside the sidewalk repair program, we'll have done 5 zones of shaving by mid-2025. So by mid-2025, we've shaved the whole city at least once, and we've done all these critical repairs. So although 2026 was originally when we were intending to have the next sidewalk survey, we're actually thinking of moving it up to 2025, since it would just be a good time to roll out and get a better picture of where we're at in terms of sidewalk hazards. So other than, coming back next month, staff recommendations tonight is to approve the Phase 7 repair lists and also approve the curb and gutter pass-through bulb out pilots at 405 Canes and at 805 San Carlos, and specifically at 805 San Carlos with the 30 feet of red curb. And I will open it up to questions.
Commission questions?
Yeah, so first, Who is responsible to maintain the landscaped area within the sidewalk? I saw some of the, for example, like what is the first address for something?
405 Kings.
Kings, they already have some nice landscaping along the trees. Are those the property owner next door doing it or something?
Yeah, the planter strip between curb and sidewalk is the property owner. Yeah.
I noticed that the dimension that the bulb out that's sticking out is from 5 feet to 7 feet. That's big enough to do a rain garden. Is it possible to add some topsoil on top of that decomposed granite and allow some landscaping?
So the reason we are straying from the kind of typical rain garden style is because we don't want, those kind of designs, they dig down because you want to retain stormwater. And that will actually be very harmful to the tree because you're going to lead to root rot and will actually end up potentially killing the tree when the purpose of this is to save the tree. And again, it's a pilot, so we're trying to just keep it as simple and low maintenance as needed. Because if we do plant things in it, it's going to require city maintenance staff to then tend to it.
I see. But in general, I really like this idea. Did you guys come up with this idea, or is this some built example somewhere else?
I haven't seen this specific idea. We kind of blended the idea of Portland does tree wells in the street. And then there's the standard GI infrastructure, rain garden kind of style. So we kind of blended that without being completely a stormwater retention, just as a out-of-the-box way to try and keep these trees in place. Because, like I said, there's been a lot of opposition to tree removals, and we're trying to find ways that we can keep these in place, and this is one of them.
I see there's a plate close to Cornell Elementary School saying Albany has the first bus stop plus the sidewalk eating space. We should get a
bus stop parklet.
Yeah, we should get a plate for this. A further comment, the 805 San Carlos, I think we can do the 16 feet because I start to see like a single passenger cars running around in Berkeley already, so cars are gonna get smaller. And then maybe the future owner would use like a motorcycle parking, one consideration for that.
I would say that if you are looking at doing motorcycle parking, I would recommend that a motion, that's specifically outlined because we would want to stripe for that if you do want to intend it for that kind of use. And again, just want to bring up that 15 feet is the minimum length per California Building Code for a compact parking spot.
I have more thoughts about that, but I'll wait till after public comment.
Other questions? All right, let's see if we have public comment.
Yes, our first commenter is Brian Martin. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brian Martin, and I had one quick comment about the 500 block of Adams Street. The city definitely should do as was recommended to not upgrade that sidewalk, given that the bowling alley project would redo all of that anyway. I do quibble that it's a sidewalk to nowhere because I walk that side. I live on the 600 block of Adams, and I frequently walk that sidewalk and go up through the orientation center for the blind and the access to San Pablo from there. So that's something that I and other people actually do use that sidewalk and quite frequently. And the sidewalk shaving that was done there maybe a year ago was helpful because it's kind of a roller coaster on that sidewalk. But it totally makes sense to hold off for the bowling alley to redo it. The other thing I would say is, as a parks commissioner, yes, there has been some opposition to street tree removals, particularly in neighborhoods that have these liquid amber trees. Apparently, they were planted by the dozens and hundreds in the East Bay about 40, 50 years ago, and they're all kind of hitting end of life at about the same time and dropping limbs and ripping up sidewalks, and so they're not really meant for urban areas. So some cities have even banned them, have whole programs to remove them systematically. So that's a lot of what's going on in those neighborhoods. The one where it went to city council was 2 trees that one of them had dropped a big limb without no storm or anything like that, and had some other serious problems. So and there actually had been a whole bunch of sidewalk repair done there because of those 2 trees a few years before. But the actual removal trigger was not sidewalk related. But those 2 were 2 of a number that had been removed in that neighborhood. Unfortunately, most of them liquid ambers that are in the same cohort of trees, and that's been the issue there. For the bulb out curb thing, I like the creative thinking. I also share some of the concerns that some of the commissioners have mentioned of people striking them, particularly the one on Canes. I walk on that sidewalk a lot, and I drive by there a lot through that area, and it's a really narrow street, and people often do take to get around each other when 2 cars are approaching, will kind of get over into the parking area. And also, what's the public process for red curbing? That would need to be noticed, I would think, up and down the block. Thank you.
Thanks for those comments.
Next, we have Jeremiah Pinguelo. Please go ahead.
Thank you, commissioners. Yeah, so the tree over there at 405 Canes, I was looking at your picture, and I was looking at the pavement on the street right there where the cars park, and it looks like this was already done a few years ago. You can see how the white concrete does kind of a zigzag right there. So it's like we just did this. So we're gonna do it again in the next few years, and then we're gonna do it again in a few years from then, and then we're gonna keep doing it again over and over and over. The reason is because that tree is right next to the Cerrito Creek. That's what you don't have in the photo. That location is actually right in front of the business offices. My old dentist, when I was in Albany High School, that's my old dentist office upstairs. So that's a very old tree. I don't know what kind of tree it is, but it looks like an oak tree. I mean, just the way that trunk is so burly. And those roots are feeding off the water from the creek. So that tree is just going to get bigger and bigger. And it's going to keep messing up the sidewalk. It's going to keep messing up the curb. It's going to keep messing up the pavement. So that's high maintenance. You know, I would recommend that have the arborist go take a look at that tree, right? Check the crown, check to see if it's in the criteria to, you know, remove it and plant a new one or something. I'm not on the side to cut down trees. Like, I love the movie Fern Gully, and I just don't like cutting down trees. But it seems like the arborists and the Parks and Rec Commission, they really haven't listened to one public comment and made a decision based on the opposing public comments. They've removed every single tree that's been put on their agenda. Doesn't matter what public comment says or not. I've noticed that. Doesn't matter what the public says, they do what they want anyway. So, I mean, that's just a problem tree. It's just going to keep messing up the sidewalk. We're going to have to keep spending money for the next, you know, life of the tree. So is that something we want to do every year? Is that high maintenance area and keep redoing it over and over? Or is that fit the criteria to, you know, remove the tree? You know, and if the other idea is, you know, those shorter parking spaces, I don't know if it's too far-fetched of an idea, but it could be saved for, you know, like the VO scooters, to require the VO scooters to be parked, you know, on the street somehow. But anyway, that kind of a little far-fetched, but yeah, just, I'd recommend referring that tree to the arborist. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Next is Stanley Mack. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Stanley. I'm actually the homeowner at 409 Keynes Avenue, so I really appreciate you guys, trying to address the ponding issue right in front of 405. And I have the same opinion as the previous speaker. I think his name is Brian. I think that tree is really damaging the sidewalk and the curb. And from hearing the pilot project, it looks like we're going to save the tree. So by doing that, we're encouraging the tree to grow bigger and bigger, and it's going to damage the sidewalk and the pavement and the gutter and the curb more and more. So I think it's, what the pilot project, what I worry about is the longevity of, we're just doing a short-term Band-Aid, basically. As I think, over time, maybe in 5 years, the roots of the tree might, block the pass-through area for the water to go to the gutter. So the ponding issue might come back again. So, I echo what the previous speaker said earlier. I completely agree with what he said. And I see that problem every day, especially, in the last month. There's a lot of water. There's just a pond of water there, not getting evaporated and things like that. And, as I walk to, El Cerrito Plaza, I walk on that sidewalk every day, and I think that sidewalk's been pretty beat up. And I think it's, something needs to be fixed about the sidewalk. And I think it's a good idea for the city to think about, consider removing the tree. I think I'm on the same side as the previous speaker. I think for the long term, I think this will be, I think this will be better for the public, for the whole block. I think a lot of people walk down that street, especially people getting off work, off BART, people have to walk on that street. And that's sort of the only way people can get from, El Cerrito Plaza and then, walk south to the city. So I think something long-term needs to be done there. And I think what worries me about the pilot project is just a short-term fix. If we keep the tree there, like the previous speaker said, the creek is right over there. So it's just going to keep feeding on the water, and it's going to keep growing bigger and bigger. And the problem is just going to keep coming back, again and again. So I think that's all I have, and I would recommend the city to consider, talking to Parks and Rec to remove that tree. And yeah, I think that's my comments.
Thank you for those comments.
We have no other hands raised.
Great. So we'll bring it back to the commission for comments, opinions, further questions.
Maybe I'll start by following up on the possibility of leaving that 12-foot parking space available. I guess my feeling is not to mark it specially for motorcycles, but to simply leave it unmarked and let drivers be creative in how they want to use it. People may, suppose somebody wants to park in a way that's blocking their own driveway there, but the car would stick out into that 12-foot zone and occupy part of it. And they want to leave as much space on the other side as possible, not to, it just seems that if we leave it unmarked, people can do whatever they want with it, whether it's a motorcycle or a very newfangled, super small car, or a car that's blocking their own driveway, or whatever works. And that seems to me more reasonable than red curbing it and really saying you're not allowed to put any kind of vehicle here for any reason. I don't really see the benefit of that.
Okay.
I'll weigh in on kind of the same thing. To my way of thinking, it's the adjacent property owner would be the person who would care. Because if they can get there and not block their own driveway, great. But if someone else tries to park there and does block their driveway, it's that resident who's going to suffer. So the whole point of red curbing it is to prevent the driveway blockage. And the only person who ought to be interested in preventing the driveway blockage is that resident. So if they don't care, then I don't see a need for us to paint it. But if they're going to be concerned about that having an impact, we can red curb it. And frankly, we don't have to decide now. We could consult with them and say, hey, we're going to build this. If you want us to red curb it, we'll do it. If you come back 6 months later and say, oh, I think I really did want it red curbed after all, we can do it then. I don't feel like there ought to be a big rush to it. But I would, it's not that the resident gets to dictate what to do. We should absolutely take their preference into account.
And a further comment regarding all the public comments. I don't know if this will save the tree or kill the tree, but from my perspective, this is a really innovative way of reclaiming street as open space. You know, we talk about, I think in previous session, we talk about chicane, talk about how in long distances will happen. I'm not sure if I can see it in my lifetime in Albany, but this is a workaround. This will be great. Not about like saving or killing the tree, but about making our streets better.
Yeah, thanks for coming up with this idea. It seems really productive.
I'm also appreciative, and I'm curious if you have any idea of how long this might take care of the growth issue. Is it a 5-year fix? Is it a 15-year fix? Is it somewhere in between?
It's
don't know.
It's difficult to say. Trees are unpredictable, but mature trees, the large roots are typically the structural roots, based on what I've understood from our forester. And especially with a mature tree, they're not going to grow, unless you're cutting it, they're not going to grow, you know, more than, they're going to stay where they are. Because if it's a large root that's holding the tree in place, it's there to stay. But that being said, it's a tree, and they can grow pretty unpredictably. Camphors is the one of the 4 or 5 canes. They generally they stay with where they are. I'm not familiar with the 805 sandcrawlers, so I would need to talk to our forester. So I really can't say.
That's fair. That's fair, and this is a new thing. So I agree that this is an intriguing idea, and we should experiment with it, see how it works into the toolkit for what we can do about trees. I like it. The red curb, I like Commissioner Javidal's sort of pragmatic approach. There was some indication in the report that, and from the picture, it looked like larger vehicles might have to use some of that area to get into the driveway. And there was a smaller vehicle pictured in the driveway, but that doesn't mean that that's the only car that uses that, or vehicle that uses that driveway. So it's a complicated mix here, and absolutely, we should bring the homeowner into the discussion, at the very least. There is a precedent, however, for this commission recommending shorter curb spaces to be left over after red curbing at intersections, for example. Specifically, the northeast corner at Washington and Canes, along Canes. There's a space from a driveway to Canes on Washington, I should say, and we wanted to daylight the corner, so we did red curb, but we decided not to red curb all the way to the driveway, and we left a fraction to be used as available without marking. I understand the best practice is to be more specific, but we've done that in the past.
Someone asked whether adding red curbing to a new location requires a notice process. Can you follow up on that?
Yes, there's 150 feet, and we did notify 150 feet. I believe that's the neighbor next to 405 Keynes. That's how they were, for example, able to call in. Otherwise, I'm not sure how they would have been notified. But we did send out notices.
Oh, for this meeting?
For the, yes,
Okay.
we send out notices to the homeowners who get repairs, sidewalk repairs, and we send out a 150-foot red curb notice. Anybody within 150 feet of the red curb.
So they already have the chance to be here tonight based on that notice?
Yes.
Okay, great.
And we have received public comment calls, so they have been received by local residents.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to follow up on one of those, which was about a disabled parking space nearby. And do you have a plan for that?
Yeah, so there's a blue, on the 405 Keynes, there's a blue curb on the south side. This will retain I believe it's 18 feet minimum space required. And it will actually slightly improve the north end because right now it's all kind of torn up. So it'll be cleaner. It'll be more.
So the blue curb will remain essentially where it is. It maybe a little bit shorter, but still long enough to qualify?
No, if anything, it appears shorter than it is right now, and it will be restored to its proper length.
Okay.
It's hard to see the north end of the blue curb because of the curb damage and the root, what the roots have done.
Okay. So there's no reason for that commenter to be concerned about losing their disabled space. Good to know.
One more comment to make, and then I'd be happy to make a motion. I think that my understanding is that any of the sidewalk repairs that we're doing in town because of tree damage are all subject to possible future damage. We know that trees grow. They may not grow fast, they continue to grow, and some are likely to damage the sidewalk again. And we know that we'll have to come back and repair it again in the future. Unless that cycle of damage and repair happens really fast, it's something that we consider to be part of, it's worth it to have the tree and occasionally have to do repairs. That to me seems baked into our whole sidewalk repair program. We don't have the expectation we're going to go out and fix all the sidewalks and they'll be forever perfect. It's just kind of a given. That's the nature of having trees, and I think that that's reasonable. It's not that we're frivolous in our expenditures. So I lean on the side of let's try to preserve the trees unless they have proven to be severely problematic and not fixable. And I really appreciate this as a creative way to do that kind of accommodation of the trees. So I'm really hopeful that it will prove to be a very effective pilot.
Hear, hear. And I would add that most of Albany was regraded around 100 years ago to create the topography that we have now. And any cement on top of that regrading is going to settle. So it's not just the trees, but they are a part of it.
So with that, do you want us to just move the staff recommendation or incorporate that in detail? I'm happy to just say that I move that we approve the staff recommendation for this item.
Should we clarify the 12-foot length of curb to be left,
With the
to be discussed with the resident?
clarification that we would consult with the neighbor at 805 San Carlos regarding whether they would prefer us to leave the 12 feet unpainted or paint it red.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? How about a roll vote?
Commissioner Chomsky,
Yes.
Commissioner Javindel,
Aye.
Commissioner Peng,
Yes.
Chair McCroskey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
We're taking a vote on how to vote yes. We have a tie
Well, I
between
tend to
yes or
vary.
aye.
I tend to vary, just for flavor. So we're going to move along to item number 5.3, Citywide Streetlighting Evaluation Update. And we will welcome our Public Works Director.
Yes, Mark Hurley, Public Works Director. Good evening, Commission. I'm just going to have some brief introductory remarks and then turn it back over to give James a little bit of a break here, and then he can dive back in because he's going to be managing the project. So the lighting evaluation is something that's been on our books for a while, and I think the community, we hear it in almost every setting, whether it's the presentation earlier today, everywhere it's lighting is an issue, and so we're really happy to move this forward. Tonight's presentation is really just a check-in of where we are in the project. We've got the RFP for the consultant out on the street. We're looking for proposals to come in, early February. And tonight's really just kind of set the expectation of how we see this going forward, because when we turn it on, we just really want to start moving. And so I guess with that, you should catch your breath.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so in case anyone is tuning in that was not here for the sidewalk repair presentation, I am James Sorelli. I'm an associate engineer with Albany's Public Works. So just so we're all on the same page, the evaluation, the citywide street lighting evaluation, the goal here is we want to get an inventory of all our existing streetlight infrastructure in hand, understand what our existing lighting levels are around the city, and then develop targets for where we want the citywide lighting to be at. And then develop some projects for near-term issues where, where street lighting might be an issue identified in the LRSP, and then develop long-term programmatic cost estimates. So the way the RFP is structured is we have 5 evaluation tasks. The first 3 tasks are kind of just coordination and getting, the background of the city. And then task 4, target lighting levels and public outreach, is when we start moving towards the consultant giving us recommendations, some evaluations on some strategies, and we involve the public with different ways of outreach. Then the last task is our report, the final report, kind of summarizing everything, and prior to delivering that, our commission and council presentations. So task 1, project kickoff, pretty much exactly what it sounds like. We'll have the consultant prepare their work plan, and we'll have a kickoff meeting, and we will meet with the city stakeholders and kind of coordinate what we're looking at and clarify the goals and make sure everyone's on the same page going forward for this project, for this evaluation. So data gathering and streetlight inventory, also pretty straightforward. We're going to have the consultant prepare an inventory of the city's existing streetlight infrastructure. And for each streetlight, we want them to categorize them based on use and location. And what I mean by use is it a street light adjacent to a street, or is it an off-street, like an Ohlone Greenway light? And then location, it sounds kind of the same, but what I mean by location is it an intersection lighting? Is it mid-block lighting? Is it off-street lighting?
Are you going to use the Caltrans definition of what's in an intersection? You don't have to answer that, I'm sorry.
We don't plan on to, as 250 feet does not work in this city. And we are not bound by the Caltrans definition for this inventory. So then once we have this inventory, we'll have a lighting review. We'll have the consultants prepare their plan to how they're going to assess lighting. And then ultimately, they'll go out and take representative measurements and survey to get what the lighting levels are. This will sum up into a technical memo. This memo will be available to the public. We'll post it on the city website after it's done. And also with this memo, the city will receive a GIS file for ArcGIS so that we have an interactive database for these streetlight infrastructure. Then task 4 is when we start involving the public and also getting our targets. So first, we're looking to get our recommendations from the consultant for what is the minimum illumination levels for certain types of streets. And also a general basic life cycle cost evaluation of different light features and configurations. We'll have an evaluation of adaptive lighting strategies in here, and what that means is the idea that say it's a low-use residential street. a potential adaptive lighting strategies where after a certain time, we would dim the lights to save electricity. And another thing is recommendations to mitigate potential light pollution. There's, concerns with dark sky, of course, when we increase lighting in cities, and what there are out there to mitigate effects to the sky while maintaining lighting on the floor. In this task, we're looking at a minimum of 2 public workshops. We're kind of going to have the consultant discuss what might be most constructive here to get the input and evaluation from the public that we want, whether that be an open house style at the community center or more of a formal transportation commission style, how it's similar to the LRSP has been done tonight, for example. And at this time, we'll also have a website similar to how the LRSP was done, where we have people can log on and input on a map their feedback. Ultimately, these recommendations and evaluations will be folded into another technical memo, really focusing on the illumination recommendations, but also talking about these other 2 things we brought up. Yeah. And again, that memo will be publicly available on the website once it's finalized. So going to the last tasks, the official public presentations and final report. So in this report, we're looking at near-term alternatives to address any, street lighting projects identified specifically in the LRSP, if there are any, and also to develop more long-term programmatic cost estimates to achieve the lighting level we're looking at, and also O&M costs to keep that lighting level up. The programmatic cost is very important. This is kind of what we'll need to understand what kind of funding or how much money we'll need to maintain a street lighting program in the future. So this will be rolled into a draft report, which will be presented to both the Transportation Commission and the Council, and then after it's drafted and we receive feedback from both bodies, we will have the final evaluation in hand. So a rough timeline, as Mark mentioned, the RFP is out. The deadline for proposals is February 8th, so in about 2 weeks. We're hoping, if things go smoothly, to have a consultant selected and we can have notice to proceed at the early March. And then we can just get rolling with the data gathering, the lighting review, the outreach through spring, and hopefully wrapped up by late summer, early fall. That way, mid-fall, late fall, we can start getting into these council and commission meetings so that we can have something wrapped up by the end of December. This is pretty important because if we're looking at funding through, say, a ballot measure, we really need to get things rolling at the start of 2024. And this will be critical to getting that rolling.
I'm sorry, funding through what?
Any type of way, but if there's a ballot measure in particular that either staff or we're looking at, it would need to be done then. Otherwise, we will have to go another election cycle. So with this evaluation, basically, we have this inventory. We understand what the city's lighting looks like. We understand what the city's lighting levels should look like. Project alternatives for any near-term issues that are brought up as countermeasures in the LRSP, and then the programmatic cost estimates for long-term improvements, including O&M to keep this street lighting up to target. So basically, the way I look at this evaluation is like the foundation of a street lighting program in the future, and also a foundation in understanding what kind of funding we need in the future. So with that, I will open it up to questions. I'll focus on questions specifically related to the evaluation, and we'll throw Mark any questions for more grander ideas.
Commission questions? I don't have any immediate questions, so let's take it to public.
All right. Our first public commenter is Jeremiah Pinguelo. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm really glad this made an agenda item. This is great. I love coming to these meetings. Whatever meeting it is in Albany, I just love coming, just attending. It's great. So yeah, thank you for this report. I'm glad you guys are really keeping an eye on this, this light situation. So basically, yeah, once we get all this data, that'll be great. You know, hopefully some funding will be available for that. I just want to say a couple things about the street lights. I think it's great to, you know, obviously redo Eastern Solano, which I mentioned a couple of times this meeting before. You know, when we do it, is it possible to upgrade these light poles to where there's a solar panel on top of the light pole, and then it adds electricity to the grid somehow? Or is it possible to put batteries inside of the pole and a solar panel on top? So during the day, the batteries inside of the pole would be able to get charged, and it would be able to generate enough electricity to run that specific pole, to run that specific LED light at nighttime, and then, you know, kind of recharge the next day. But also have access to the grid, just in case the batteries, you know, run out or whatever. But, you know, it's using electricity, right? And so I think that this commission would be great to work with the Climate Action Committee on this also. And Michelle, you're right in the middle of both these things. So, you know, I know you're going to have a great positive input, Michelle. I know you're going to have a great input on this, you know, keeping everything organized. But I think, you know, it's also climate action because it has to do with electricity and renewable energy. So it's kind of more broad spectrum than just Transportation Commission. You know, we're discussing lights because it has to do with safety on the roads. It has to do with pedestrian safety on the sidewalks. But it also has to do with, you know, climate action. So I think, you know, two commissions working together on this would be great. But yeah, my suggestion is just, you know, get a light pole with a solar panel on top and LED lights, and that's a good solution. So looking forward to this project. I really am. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for your comments.
And we do not have any other hands raised.
Okay. Bring it back to the commission for opinions, comments. Commissioner Chavatal?
Started by saying it looks like a good plan to figure out what we need and figure out the funding, et cetera. With respect to solar-powered streetlights, Berkeley has been trying those out for the last few years, and they are cheaper to install because you don't have to hook them up to the grid, and so far seem to be working okay. So certainly feel free to reach out, and I'll put you in touch with the folks who have the more detailed information on what we've been using there.
I'm just thrilled that this is happening. I think when I was on the commission 5 years ago, it felt like every meeting somebody was complaining about the poor condition of street lighting, and it's sort of the way it was with sidewalks 10 or 15 years ago, where it was just like this big problem that nobody knew how to deal with it, so nobody ever did anything. And now we have this wonderful sidewalk program, and it feels like we're stepping up to take that kind of let's get it done approach to lighting, and I'm really excited about that, so thank you.
I too am excited, and I'm very interested in the differentiation between sort of general lighting and specific lighting, whether it's for intersections or human scaled. You know, we put in the Buchanan pathway without specific lighting many years ago, And I'd love to see what it would take to light that path, and others, of course. So this body helped, I think, contribute to the RFP. Do you want a member of this body on the proposal review committee?
Sure. Yeah, I think we were already going to reach out and have one member on that.
I'm sorry?
We were thinking of that, and we would like to have one commission member on that review committee.
Okay. Is there interest in that, in participating? Or, I know I am, but, you know, that's me. I'm always stepping forward. I want to make sure that I don't step on anybody else who is interested.
I nominate Ken.
Let it not be said that I pushed myself forward. So I would be interested in at time allowing, participating in that. Great. Let's see. What do you want from us on this one? This is
Comments?
comments to staff. Are there any further comments before we close this item? Great. Thank you very much, and good luck with the project. And that moves us right along. We actually need a continuation of the meeting since we're past 9:30. We have just a couple more things. I think we could
I'll
go
move to extend to 10.
We have a move to extend to 10 and a second from Commissioner Pang. All in favor, raise your right hand. Carries unanimously. Great. Thank you very much, Public Works. Good to see you at our meeting. So we have 4 seated commissioners, and if we chose, we could choose chair and vice chair, because we definitely have a quorum, but we might choose to wait to see if we get another member by the next meeting, which not only would be more fair to that person, but would allow another potential appointee. Well, come on, you guys. I'm just playing to your preferences. I would suggest that we continue this item till the next meeting, if that's agreeable to the other commissioners.
I have no preference.
Okay, then,
It's fine by me.
all right. Then I'm going to close this item without a motion and move on to announcements.
The main announcement was that the Canes and Adams Bikeway pilot project is under construction and should be completed next week.
I would add that there seems to be some action from the Alameda County Transportation Commission regarding San Pablo, and they have opened up a survey, it is not a comprehensible verbal link that I could mention at this moment, but hopefully it'll go out in city communication through the e-newsletter.
And they should be, we're not at future agenda items, but they should be coming to present to this body in the future.
Oh, terrific. Great. But that process has already started, gathering public input, and people should be aware of that. Terrific.
It looked like there was public comment about 6-1.
We do have 2 hands raised for this.
Right. So let's take public comment on 6-1, unless there are any other commissioner questions.
We don't usually take comment on announcements, but I did list this as an item which I think caused some confusion for folks. So it was just a construction update announcement, but there are folks that did want to discuss the project.
We have received some correspondence. The construction is not finished. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We're not as a commission, in a place where we can evaluate this project as it will be built. I think we should take 1-minute public comment, just because there was confusion and people want to have a voice. If people could be very specific, and we will listen to that.
Okay. Our first commenter is Brian Martin. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. One thing is, I think at Washington and Adams, there's the word stop and a line are missing on the south end of that in the northwest corner of that block. We do need an all clear. We do need to know when it's okay to drive both directions. I did want to note that the parking is something that the Transportation Commission takes up, and that the city has updated its website to say that it looks like the city might be ticketing contraflow parking, and that is something that, although I love this project and in so many ways, that's a deal killer for me, and for many reasons. So that needs to be addressed and deprioritized, just like parking in front of one's driveway is deprioritized. Thank you.
Thank you.
And our next commenter is Carrie Schulman. Please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say I think it's great that you're doing something to improve biking next to parallel to San Pablo, since San Pablo is really scary to bike on. But I tried out that new, like, going north on Canes today, and it was pretty scary because that road is narrow, and going up against cars that are coming down the very middle of the street, there's really almost no room to get past cars, and I'm probably just going to keep using Stanage instead because it's just too scary to use Canes. It would be really great if you could put the poles all the way across, so Canes by Solano there became a local only street, and they wouldn't be using that street to get on to make the right turn onto Solano, and then it'd feel safe for bikes. Or if you took out a lane of parking to make a northbound bike lane, it would feel safer. But as it is now, I don't feel safe biking on it.
Thank you. Like I said, it's not fully completed. Stay tuned.
No more hands raised. Oh, sorry, no more hands raised.
No more hands raised. Thank you.
So in response to those comments, can you just address the simple question of how will people know when it is okay to drive both directions on the street?
There are mailers that I think went out today that could reiterate that it should be complete next week. There's going to be, I think, the final markings on Tuesday of next week.
So for now, it's still technically a one-way street?
The signage is up, so I don't know that there's any more that needs to be given in terms of the okay. There is signs reiterating that you're not supposed to enter in the one-way direction.
Okay, and the one-way signs
and it's
have been
marked
removed?
with the stop signs at this point.
Okay.
Right, so to be clear, there's only one way to enter the street, but you can exit in both directions. Once you're on the street, you can drive either way, but you can only enter from the north end of Canes or from the south end of Adams.
And it's already the case that you can turn around and drive in the opposite direction?
As of the signs being installed, I would interpret it that way.
Okay.
There are stop signs at both ends, along with stop bars at maybe almost all of the locations. Great. Well, thank you. Future agenda items. This is an item on our agenda that we do not take public comment on, but we would take commissioner requests for future agenda items at this time. You can also email me until about 2 weeks before the meeting. This time, Our next meeting is Thursday, February 23rd at 7 p.m. And thank you all for rejoining the commission in one form or another. Harry is a past member. I don't know if you knew that, Nelson. And to staff, and I'll close the meeting.